So this is the webinar for the Department of Agriculture and Markets 2019-2020 New York State Companion Animal Capital Projects Fund. So first of all, it's important to understand the application deadlines. So first of all, the grant opportunity ID is AGM01 CACF 19-2019. The deadline is January 21st at 4 p.m. So not 4:01, not 4:10, but 4 o'clock. So if you wait and you take too long and maybe you have some problems filling out your application or completing it and it gets past the 4 o'clock deadline, your application will not be accepted. So we want you to make sure that you get your application submitted, so make sure that you submit it 24 or even 48 hours ahead of time would be good practice. So again, application deadline is January 21st at 4 p.m. We have a question and answers section, so we want to be able to we want you to be able to ask questions, and we will answer them publicly for everybody to see. And the questions are due by 4 o'clock on January 3rd of 2020. So we have this between now, today, in November, until January 3rd to submit questions. When questions are answered, we'll have them uploaded in 2 places, one on the Grants Gateway and one to the Agriculture website, which I'll show you where to find. There's an email address in the RP that you'll find to submit those questions, and that's Michaela Fowler. You can see it right here as well. So we do have a technical help desk for the Grants Gateway. We're open Monday through Friday to answer emails and phone calls, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So this is for technical assistance and information about the Grants Gateway and about the pre-qualification process. So you can go to the Grants Management website. You can see right here, grantsmanagement.ny.gov, and I'll be going to that in a few minutes to show you that. You can also email us at grantsgateway@its.ny.gov, and you can call us here, 518-474-5595. So these are to ask technical questions, things about your Grants Gateway registration or your user IDs or how to navigate or how to get your organization pre-qualified or keep up your pre-qualification. So we can't answer questions about your specific project, your specific application. And there are other resources at the Grants Management website. You'll see there's a link up in the top menu you'll see for resources for grant applicants. So we'll go to that as well. So first of all, you have to register. If you're not already, all entities that wish to apply for grants in New York State must be registered in the Grants Gateway. So this process actually is done through mail. You have to fill out a form, get it notarized, and mail it to us in Albany. So again, information about that registration information can be found on the Grants Management website. It can also be found on the portal, so you can find the form on the Grant Opportunity portal or the Grants Management website. And again, I'll show you both of those as we go through. So pre-qualification. This is for not-for-profit organizations. So all nonprofit organizations applying for grants in New York State must be pre-qualified in the Grants Gateway prior to the grant application deadline. So in this case, that's 4 o'clock on January 21st. So again, refer to the Grants Management website for pre-qualification information. Again, you must be pre-qualified by that deadline of 4 o'clock on January 21st. And governmental entities do not need to pre-qualify, so this is only for not-for-profits. So it's important that you get that done. It doesn't have to be done before you start your application, but it does have to be done prior to that deadline. So one thing I want to talk about is grantee user roles. This is something that trips up some people as they go through the system, and I want to explain it here. So the system is set up with role access, meaning your account will have a certain role tied to it, and that role is allowed to do only certain things in the system. So for instance, when we first set your organization up, we set up somebody here on the bottom left in this grantee delegated administrator role. Usually it's 2 people, but if it's a smaller organization, it'll only be 1. But the grantee delegated administrator can add or edit user accounts and manage pre-qualification. That's called the document vault. So adding or edit user accounts, we leave it up to you to decide who has access to the Grants Gateway at your organization. So we set up your first 1 or 2 delegated admins, and then the rest is up to you. and you decide who at your organization gets these other roles. So, for instance, we have up here in the top left a grantee role. This is somebody who can start an application. They can save the application changes, but one thing they can't do is they cannot submit the application. So maybe this is a grant writer for your organization or somebody who's going to be working on the grant but not actually submitting it and signing off on it. That would be somebody in one of these other roles on the right here, either the grantee contract signatory or the grantee system administrator. So you can see both of these roles have all the same abilities that the grantee has. They can start an application, save an application, but they can also submit the application, sign off on it. So you must have somebody in one of these roles at your organization, or else you're not going to be able to submit your application. So that was the grantee contract signatory. The grantee system administrator is very similar. It has all the same abilities that the grantee and grantee contract signatory does, and it has some additional administrative abilities as well, which we don't need to go over in this webinar here. So again, to reiterate here, the grantee delegated administrator can add new accounts and work in the document vault, but they cannot work on grant applications. Your organization must have somebody in the role that can submit an application, and that would be the grantee contract signatory or the grantee system administrator. And if you would like, you can add somebody in the role of grantee, and that person is basically a grant writer who can start and edit the application but can't submit the application. And it is certainly acceptable for one person to have multiple roles in the system and thus multiple accounts. So you can use the same email address, you can use the same password, but the user needs a new account for each role. So if you're a smaller organization and maybe you're the only person doing it all, you may very well have the grantee delegated administrator account and a grantee contract signatory so that you can start and sign and submit applications. You wouldn't need all those roles because that would be redundant, but you do need at least those two. All right, so what are the next steps? First of all, make sure that your organization is registered in the gateway. Remember, that is going through mail, so that may take a couple days to get taken care of. You don't want to wait until the last week and then realize you're not even registered. If you're a nonprofit, make sure that you are pre-qualified, or at least work to get pre-qualified before that January 21st deadline. So you can be doing the application and pre-qualification in tandem. Ensure that you have people in your organization set up with the correct roles. Just what I talked about, you need to have somebody who can start and edit an application, and you need somebody who can actually submit the application. Download and read the RFP in its entirety, including the supporting documents found on the department's website. So they do a good job of providing a lot of support information for you, example budgets and things like that, that I certainly think you should be reading and understanding and having with you as you're preparing your application. Many applications have been disqualified in the past by eligibility questions because they just didn't read and follow the RFP. So please don't be one of those organizations where you put all the time into it and we have to disqualify you anyway because you didn't follow the directions. So we want to make this as easy as possible, and it has to be as fair as possible to everybody, so everybody has the same requirements. Again, if you have any questions, follow the RFP and the instructions there, and they tell you to send the questions to Michaela Fowler. We've got her email address right here. And of course, start your application. Once you get registered and you get an account with the system, I suggest you start your application the sooner the better, and certainly submit your application prior to the deadline. If you wait till after, it won't be accepted. And I do suggest you do it maybe 24 or 48 hours in advance. Sometimes you'll try to submit it and you'll realize that you missed a page or you forgot something and you have an error. And if you're doing that at 3:58, you probably won't have time to actually get it in on time. And just to reiterate that point I mentioned again, you can start and work on both your application and pre-qualification at the same time. So if you're not pre-qualified yet, that's fine. Go ahead and start your application. You just need to make sure that you are pre-qualified at the date and time that the application is due. So 2 sites you should be aware of. I'm going to go first to the grants management website. So this is grantsmanagement.ny.gov. You can see up here in the address bar. And this is our website for the Grants Gateway, and you can see the headers up here in the main navigation. If you're new, you could search for funding. this is where you get information to register your organization. So if I click on that, scroll down, we've got an overview, we've got information, and we've got the forms. So there's actually the registration document, which is right here, and some other forms you may need. The substitute W-9 form is something that you need if you don't have an SFS vendor ID, which is the statewide financial system. If you don't have that, that's where we start with, and if you submit that form along with your registration, we can get you registered in SFS. So read the directions, it'll explain that, but again, that's in the grants management site on the Register Your Organization page. The other thing here is getting pre-qualified, so it talks about pre-qualification. And again, an overview and some information about it, and then as we get to the bottom, we have manuals and documents. So required forms and documents that you have to fill out, and then resources here, including the vendor manual, which is the whole manual for the Grants Gateway, and then the pre-qualification manual, which is obviously targeted towards pre-qualification and the document vault. So if you're new, I suggest you go through that as well. Now, we do have webinars for those topics as well. If we go down to training and guidance for grant applicants, we have live webinars, documents, and videos. So if we go to webinars, we do have webinars about how to register, how to get pre-qualified, and then a generic one about applications. I wouldn't do that because you're here in this webinar, and this will be more targeted toward this companion animal application. So again, that's under training and guidance for grant applicants. And like I said, besides the webinars, we have the documents that I just referred to, and also instructional videos. There's some videos about how to navigate the gateway and how to go through it. And videos how to register, how to get pre-qualified, and how to apply. Again, I wouldn't worry about that webinar or that video apply to a grant because we have this targeted one here. Okay, so that's the grantsmanagement.ny.gov website, and then you should go to the Agriculture and Markets website, and that's agriculture.ny.gov. And they actually just launched their new website yesterday. You can see it looks very similar to our style. All the state agencies are using the same style now with their updated websites. And if you were to go to business development and funding opportunities, you can find, as you scroll down, the available funding opportunities. And the first one here, at least the first one now, maybe sometime in the future this won't be on top, but this is RFP 0221, Companion Animal Capital Projects Fund, Round 3. This is the one we're talking about. So you can click on it or click on Learn More to learn more. Okay, so the overview talks about what this is for. So this is for eligible municipal and incorporated not-for-profits, pounds, shelters, and humane societies to submit proposals for funding for consideration for the Companion Animal Capital Projects Fund. So there's an RFP here. You certainly should read that, and I'm going to open it and look at it in a few minutes. And there's a couple other good links for information as well. So how to apply, information here about how to apply, and some related documents that will be very helpful. So the project-specific terms and conditions, this is just an FYI. This is what would be part of your contract if you were to be awarded a contract. Talks about insurance requirements, math calculation for the budget, so this will help you figure out your budget. Eligible expenses, what's allowed, and then the evaluation instrument basically showing you how the questions will be evaluated by the reviewers so you know that you can target things properly. So I would certainly use all of those, and you may be here because you went here and you clicked on this link to the applicant webinar. Obviously, if you're going to be watching this video, that will no longer be available, but we will post the video here as we get this ready on YouTube. And then obviously, contact information here as well. So I'm going to go and click on the RFP right here. And you can see it's RFP 0221. And again, 2019-2020, New York State Companion Animal Capital Projects Fund. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I will point out a few things that you can see. Section 1 is the introduction with the overview and timeline, information about the Q&A. Question 2 is project requirement. Section 2 is project requirements. It talks about the costs and match requirements, and it's important to understand the match requirements. proposal requirements, including the format and registration and pre-qualification that we just talked about. And then it goes into how it's going to be evaluated, how we receive the proposals and score them, when awards are made, and information about a debriefing. And then if you were to obtain a contract, this is information in sections 5 and 6 about contracts that result from these applications. So I want to scroll down here, and then section 7 is other considerations that you should be aware of. So here is the timeline. So in section 1.2, you can see the timeline here, and again, there's that proposal due date, 4 p.m. on January 21st. We talked about the questions, and the questions will be posted on or about January 9th, but we will be taking them throughout the process, and we will be posting answers throughout the process as they become available. So it's not that you'll have to wait until January 9th to see all the answers. We'll do them as often as we can to get them on the website. We suspect awards will be made in mid to late February, and then contracts should be 2-year contracts, start around April 10th, 2020. Okay, so you should be aware of if you're an eligible applicant, if funding is what funding is available to you based on the size of your organization, the size of the municipality that you're in. So in my example, I'm going to use a small one. So I'm going to be an individual municipality with not less than 50,000, and I'm going to ask for a grant of not less than 50,000 and not more than 200,000. So I'm going to be like 185,000, let's say. But you can see larger organizations, the larger municipalities have larger thresholds as well. So they can ask for anywhere between 100,000 and 500,000 for their projects. Now there's a match requirement here, and the RFP will explain the match, and so will the supporting documents that I showed you as well. So when we have these smaller projects, you have to come up with 50% of the total project cost. Now, one thing we want to point out is you may have a huge project going on. You may have, let's say, a $5 million or $1 million project going on. That's fine, but for the purposes of this grant opportunity, you would be best served if you were to carve out a portion of that and only apply to that for the grants gateway. Meaning, maybe you pick a $800,000 project so that you can ask for $500,000 from the grant. You wouldn't want to have to come up with 25% of a $25 million grant, or not to exceed $500,000. You would want to do it on a smaller portion of it. So yes, you may have larger projects going on in the scope of this, but for the purposes of this grant opportunity, you would be best served to select a smaller portion of it that falls within the guidelines of the grant opportunity here. So imagine that the project I start working on here is a much larger project, but I'm only going to ask for a certain amount of it. So section 2.2, we go over the eligible costs. And then 2.3, we talk about the match requirements. So it is depending on the funding that you're requesting, you will need to provide a minimum of 25 or 50% of the total project costs. So matching funds must be in the form of cash and apply to cost categories that are listed in that section we just looked at before. So you have to provide evidence that this funding is available, actually. All right, we talked about pre-qualification and the due date and time. So I'm not going to go through the rest of this, but you certainly should, and what you should do, actually I will go through this section. 4.2, when we get into the questions that I answer in my application, we need to be aware that this is how we're going to be, this is how our applications are going to be assessed. They'll be looking at these questions and these criteria for scoring our applications. So you want to make sure that you really did cover all these sections, all these subcategories here, to make sure that your applications are reviewed in the best light possible. Okay, so again, if I was to go back to the agriculture website, there is that terms and conditions we talked about, insurance requirements, but then there's that match document, eligible expenses, and the evaluation instrument. Those three are also very important for you to realize, for you to read to understand how things will work in the evaluation of your applications. So successful applicants really must be shovel-ready and be able to start your submitted project within 60 days of executing the contract. So we want to make sure that this isn't just some concept. You're actually going through the work, coming up with a budget, coming up with a plan, and making that readily available to us in the Grants Gateway application. So that's what I'll kind of do in my application. I'm going to be very generic just for the sake of time, but in your application, you need to show that you are ready to go and you've done your homework. Or you will be ready to go, I should say. All right, so let's do that. Let's get into the Grants Gateway. And if I go to grantsgateway.ny.gov, it brings me to the Grant Opportunity Portal. So the portal is just information for anybody who wants to search for grant opportunities. So remember, in the Grants Management website, I showed you how you could register your organization. You can also do that here in the Grants Gateway. If we click on this Request Access Now, there's that same registration form that I showed you from the Grants Management website. There's that same substitute W-9 form that I showed you from the Grants Management website. So that's, again, from the portal, grantsgateway.ny.gov, and we clicked on Request Access Now. Notification here, this is to sign up for notifications when grant opportunities are posted. Obviously, this one has already been posted, so it's too late to do that for companion animal. But if you did click on Sign Up Now, you could fill out your name and email address and select which types of grant opportunities you want to be alerted for. And then if something is posted in one of these categories, or all of these categories if you'd like, you would receive an email with a link to that grant opportunity. So that's from the portal notification. And then browse and search is how we can find grant opportunities that are out there. So let's go to search, and we'll search for the grant opportunity. And we don't have to use the full name. We can just type in the word companion, if I can spell it right, or companion animal if you'd like. And I search for the word companion, and I find two of them out there. One is last year's, and one is this year's. So you can see the difference. One is clickable and one is not. And we know that the due date here, January 21st, 2020, and it was posted on November 8th, last week. So we can click on the link here and find out a little bit more information about it. So remember I mentioned that grant opportunity ID. When we start our application, it will be this ID plus a 5-digit number. So AGM01 CACF19 2019-00001, let's say, if I'm the first application. Who this is through, obviously Department of Agriculture and Markets, the name of it, the contact information we talked about, and a paragraph or a few sentences about the grant opportunity. On the right here is some of the dates that we talked about. So there's that due date, again, 4 p.m. Some of the other details we talked about, for instance, that there's 2-year contracts, there's $4.75 million available. We talked about awards that are between $50,000 and $500,000, depending on the criteria we talked about. The Q&A, questions are due by January 3rd. Questions will be answered, rolling throughout that time, but finally on January 9th. And ignore that 12 a.m. It may be later in the day. It certainly will be. And then who can apply for it? Governmental entities and not-for-profits. Who it's targeting, not really driving anything here. And then this is what drove the emails, the service area. So people that have signed up for, let's say, agricultural supports would have received an email for this. Yeah, we know agricultural supports really isn't what the companion animal capital fund is all about, but there's not too many categories that are, geared towards animal shelters. Now, the other thing here is this View Grant Opportunity. So if I click on that, it'll bring me to the agriculture website and back to where we were to find that funding opportunity. So we were in the portal, the Grant Opportunity Portal at grantsgateway.ny.gov, but we can't apply from here. If you want to apply, you've done your registration for your organization, you've received a user ID, and it's in one of those roles that can start and work on an application, and you need to now log in. So if I go up to the top here and go to the Grants Gateway login, I can log in to the system. If you forgot your login, but maybe you know your user ID but not your password, you can click on Forgot Password and then put in your login ID and your email address, and we'll send you a new temporary password. Now, in my case, we're not going to do this in the live system. I'm going to do this in a little testing site we have. So let me log into that. and I'm going to log into it as somebody in the role of grantee contract signatory. So her name is Barbara Signatory, fittingly. Oops, I forgot the number, B Signatory 1, and then her password. So your usernames are always your first initial, last name, and a number. Depending on how long your last name is, it might be cut off. I think it allows up to maybe 9 characters. All right, so we've logged in. I'm Barbara, who is a grantee contract signatory, and we know from that PowerPoint that she will be allowed to start an application. So she'll be doing it here under View Opportunities. So there's 403 opportunities that are available to organizations like her, but obviously there's only the one that we'll be looking for. You can ignore My Inbox. That is a copy of any emails you might have received from the system. It's not relevant to what you're doing here, so again, I would say just ignore it. And later on, we'll see that once she starts an application, we'll have a task down here. It'll be a section called My Tasks. And that's a way to get back to your application once you've already started it if you need to. Now, you could also get back to it up here on the top, because there's a link here for applications. This in the white bar or gray bar here is how to search. So you can go back to the portal and search grant opportunities. You can go to applications and search applications that your organization has started. You can search for contracts that your organization has already received, payments that you've already been paid through in the Grants Gateway progress reports based on contracts, and other related tasks. So we can look at some of those things later, but she hasn't started an application, so there's no point in searching for it right now. The black bar is kind of administrative links. You can see there's a link to training materials. I would go to the grants management website instead because those are more updated. Organization, this is where your grantee delegated admin goes in and they click on their organization name. And from here, they can manage the members under organization members, and they can manage their pre-qualification under document vault. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I will show you organization members. A quick way to add somebody new is to go to, again, organization members, and then, actually, I'm sorry, I can't show you because they would have a button here for a new member, and then they'd be able to add a member, and that's how they would add somebody as a user. So I'm not the type of user that can do that, so all I can see is that our list of current members. Okay, so I'm going back home to the main page of the Gateway, and I want to start an application. So this blue bar up here will change. This is kind of an action bar, I call it. It'll change based on what you can do on a certain page. So you'll see when we get into an application that there'll be a save button up here that I can save the page I've been working on. So let's do that. Let's get into an application. So you log in, you're in an appropriate role of somebody who can apply for a grant, and you click on View Opportunities. You can either scroll through it, or more likely you'll want to search. So again, I'll search for the word companion, and hit search, and I find it. So there's one grant opportunity available to me with the word companion in it, and of course that's the one we want, and we'll click on it. So this looks just like what we saw in the portal. Remember, the portal was up here, but now that we're logged in, there's a couple other things. One is a reminder of the contact information, and the other is, down here in the bottom left, it's no longer a link to the RFP, it's a link to actually start my application. So that's how you apply. You don't go through the portal, you go from your home page, you search for opportunities, and you click on here, apply for grant opportunity. We get so many calls at the help desk or emails saying, I can't find the button to start it. If you can't find the button to start your application, there's 2 reasons why. 1, you went to the portal, which you should not have, or 2, you're not logged in under the right role. You need to be a grantee contract signatory, or a grantee system administrator so that you can go to View Opportunities, search for the name, click on it, and then click Apply for Grant Opportunity. So that's what I'll do. I'll start my application. Okay, so I am application number 1. So my application number is AGM01 CACF19 2019 00001. So one of yours will be number 1, and any subsequent one will be number 2, 3, 4, etc. So you can see I have a few other buttons here now. I have these green buttons here, and we can see we've got the menu, which actually is really the main page. It'll bring us back to this main page here. The forms menu is where we do most of the work of our application. We have status changes. Eventually you'll see I can submit my application. Management tools, not too much here you need to worry about, although I can show you later what they do. And then progress reports and related documents, they are only related to contracts. Of course, we don't have a contract yet, so that won't be applicable here. So the main page just goes over our project title, how much we requested, and what our total project cost is. Obviously, we haven't filled anything out yet, so let's do that. That's done here under the Forms menu. One more thing I want to mention is this Details button. It's on all of these pages, and if you click it, it expands this section, and it shows, again, the name of the grant you're applying for, what role you're logged in as, the name of your organization, and the status. So right now, the status is application in process, and I know I have a due date of 1/21 at 4 p.m. So let's go to the Forms menu. You'll notice you can hover on it to see it, but it's a lot easier if you just click on the word Forms menu, and you're brought to the Forms menu itself. So first of all, the first section here is Contract Document Properties. You can ignore that section, but if you want to, you can look at it. There's nothing we're asking you to do in this section, though. This is just a listing of what would become part of your contract if you were to obtain a contract. So there's a sample of the state's master grant contract. It's good to look at that just to see how contracts are laid out. The sample just has every option in it, so it's a little excessive. But there's also the attachment A1, the program-specific terms and conditions. You might remember that was also on the website for the Agriculture and Markets website. Attachment B would be a budget, attachment C would be a work plan, attachment D would be payment and reporting schedule. That's just all parts that make up a contract. And then there's an attachment E, which is insurance requirements. Again, that's on the website, and you can see if I click View File, you can see a link to that as well. So going back to the Forms menu, we clicked on Contract Document Properties, and that's just for your information. Same deal with the next section, Application Information. Later on, I might want to review my application, and I could do that under Print Application. I have another link to the RFP. This will bring me to the website again. There's a link to instructions here as well. And if you click on that, it'll go through pretty much the instructions that I'm going through right now. And later on, you'll be able to look at your application in one PDF, and that's here under Application Versions. So that's not created until after I submit the application. It's about 5 or 10 minutes later. But when you do that, you'll have a PDF here that you'll be able to look at. That's what your reviewers will use at the department to actually review your application. So where you need to start is right here under Program Information. So you can see we've got the Program Information section, we've got a Budget section, a Work Plan, and then Uploads. There's another folder called the Grantee Document folder if you need to upload anything additional. We would prefer you don't unless you're asked to, but these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 sections here, or actually these 4 sections, are really the ones you should be worrying about. So let's just go in order to project site addresses. So this is just letting us know where is this project being run out of. So I'm going to just call it we'll just call it 123 Main Street. And even though I'm going to be using this as a small organization, I'll just say it's Albany. You need the county, the zip. There's 2 sections here for regional council and agency-specific region. You can see they're not required, so you can just leave them blank. No reason to select anything there. So I put in the name and description, and the address, and I'll hit Save. So when you hit Save, you see that blue bar had the Save button. Now it has a couple other buttons as well. The Delete button, you can ignore, add note, and maybe later on we'll want to check global errors. That'll go through and see what pages we've missed, what required fields we've missed. Obviously, we're just getting started here, so we've missed a lot so far. But notice what happens when you save a page without errors, you get this green light that says the information has been saved. Now, if I miss a required field, like this name description where there's a red asterisk, and I hit Save, gives me an error. the project name description is a required field. Now, it still saved the information I typed in under address, but it's never going to let me submit my application unless I take care of these required fields, anything with a red asterisk. So I'll go in here and put the name back in and hit save, and my error should go away. Okay, so let's go back to the Forms menu. I can hover on it, but instead I'm going to just click on it again and get back to the menu and see that I've entered something in here at 10:38 and 10 seconds, and then I saved it again at 10:39. So you can see the Forms menu will show who started it and who last saved it and when. So the next thing is to get through the program-specific questions. And these are questions that you should be, you're going to need to answer. And what I would do is I would read these questions either in the RFP or here in the gateway, and I would write my answers in, let's say, a Word document. Make sure that you cover all the materials that we're asking for, make sure that your grammar and spelling is correct, and that you can fill it in within the parameters of each question. So for instance, many of these have a 4,000 character limit. Then you would come back into the gateway and you could copy and paste your answers into these forms. Because to sit here and type your answers will just be really time consuming and it's actually hard to read. So project title. So you can see this talks about how to answer the questions here. It tells you where to look at. And I'm just going to put in my project title, Jeff's being very generic. You should be obviously a little more specific. So what are the main objectives as it relates to the secure containment, health, and adequate care of sheltered dogs and cats? So I'm just going to write here is my answer, but you obviously would have a lot more to write. Let's say this is my answer here. So maybe I've got that many characters. All right, why is the project important? So I'm not going to read all the questions here. That's not really the point of this webinar. It's to show you how to do it, not what to put into it. So reasoning why, how will it positively impact animals. So there is an annual statistics report worksheet in the pre-submission uploads. So some of the things you're going to need to do here, need to go and download a form and use that to calculate information or to provide information to us. So I can go over to the pre-submission uploads and get that document. Now, I can't just leave this page, though. You need to save your page as you're moving along. So if I hit save, now I get a whole bunch of errors. Why? Because, of course, I didn't answer those questions yet. But that's okay. It did save my 1A through 1D. Now, I realize I need to go to the pre-submission uploads to find the annual statistics report. There's other uploads we can provide here. Detailed cost estimates, list of construction materials, floor plans, information about local support. So as we go through here, you can see there's some information that we need to provide uploads for, and one of them is based on a template that we provide to you. So let's stop here and go back to the Forms menu. And we'll go down to those required, to those attachments here in the pre-submission uploads. So you can see I've got an error on my program-specific questions. I'm obviously not done with that. But if I go to pre-submission uploads, I can see there's that statistics worksheet that we talked about. So please download and complete the spreadsheet, then attach it to question 1E in the program-specific questions. There's some other documents here that are you can use for your reference and your calculations. And so there's nothing else here that you have to upload. It's just for your reference. But in this case, we'll download the annual statistics worksheet. Now you would click on click here. I can't because it's our test system. So just ignore what I'm doing here. I just have to take this out. So if you were to click on it, you would be presented with this document, and you would enable editing, and you would fill this out. So again, the purpose of this webinar is not for me to show you what you would do in the real situation. You need to actually go through this document and fill it out and then save it. So I'm going to save it. Just going to save it to my desktop. Okay, so when I get back to my application, I can provide that as an upload. Again, other documents here you can just click on to download for your reference. All right, so let's go back to the Forms menu, and let's go back to our program-specific questions and continue to fill them out. So remember I saved, and I got a bunch of these errors here. It is important for you to save periodically as you go through this. The system will time you out after 20 minutes of inactivity. So inactivity is just you sitting here typing, right? You haven't saved the page, so that timer gets refreshed as you save a page or move from page to page, not as you're just typing. So make sure that you save every 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, certainly no longer than 15 because there's a timeout at 20 minutes. And we've seen plenty of people who've called our help desk to complain that, hey, I got logged out because I was in the middle of doing something and maybe I got a call or I, took a break and I didn't save my information. There's nothing we can do to help you. You just have to do it over again. So make sure you're saving on a regular basis, certainly no longer than 15 minutes. Okay, so this one, 1E, is that worksheet. I can browse and go to my desktop and attach it. So project description. So we can put in an answer here, or we can upload a document, including information in a PDF here. So all these uploads, we make sure to note to you that you can only upload one document for each question. So if you had multiple documents, you need to combine them into one PDF if they were all for this question 2A. So in my case, I'm just going to use a sample document I have here. It's nothing really, it's not really any details, but I provided that here. Now you might want to, you can see this has a red asterisk here, so I do have to type in something. Maybe I can say see attached, or I can type information here too. So you can type in this field, or you have to type in this field, or you can also include an attachment. Same deal for question 2B. Can I not spell this word? There we go. And then your attachment here if you have an attachment. Let's say I'm not going to put an attachment in here. And I am here. Oops. Okay, there's your answer there. 2E talks about your work plan. You will have based it on the ASB guidelines in your responses, and I'll get to the work plan in a few minutes. So section 3 is the reasonableness of cost. Here's my answer to that. 3B, here's my answer to that. Now let's say I'm going to skip 3C. I'm going to forget to do it. You shouldn't, but I just want to show you what happens later on when we try to submit an application and we forgot to fill out a required field. So let's not do 3C, and let's answer 3D. This is the financial overview of our project. And again, we have guidance in the RFP that will help you with what you need to provide here. So go to Browse, and I'm just going to attach any random document here. So I'm going to hit Save. We know we'll have at least one error because of 3C. I'm missing my answer to that. Whoops, and I missed 1E. Yeah, 1E was an attachment, but it did have an asterisk here for text as well. All right, so I've saved it, and I forgot 3C. Let's pretend I think I'm going back to it, or I just don't notice that, and we'll move on with our application. So we'll go back to the Forms menu. It should be obvious to you that you have a problem, though, because you've got the error here and the red stop sign. Now, here's a good point to show that you don't have to do this all in one sitting. You can leave and come back another time or another day. So if I was to log out and I log back in, I can go back to my home page. So once I'm logged in, I get brought to the home page, and I can either search for the application up here, or I can find that it's now a task for me. Since I've started something, I can click on Open Tasks and see this application number that I've already started. I can click on it and resume with it. So that's one way of doing it. Home page, open my tasks, and click on it. And then up here, I can also go to Applications and search for it. So if I search for the word companion, I'm saying show me all applications that my organization has started with the word companion in it. And I hit search, and of course there's the one we were just working on. you wouldn't want to click on your organization name. You want to click on the application number to get back into it. All right, I'm back into it. I'm back at the main page, and I can go down to the Forms menu and continue where we left off. Let's ignore our error here, and we'll go into the budget. So you can see the capital budget is broken down into these three sections here: acquisition, construction, and administration. So I'm going to go and just put in a few things in some of these categories. So my contract or my application is going to be somewhere around $150,000, $180,000. You obviously would have done the work. You're not going to be making it up on the fly here. So let's say we'll go to acquisition. And I'm going to go here and say new kennels and associated hardware. All right. So item number, if you have like an internal item number or maybe an order number or something, you can do that. Quantity, if applicable. Let's say I have 22 front and 25 rear. I'm just kind of copying from one that went through in the past. And then what's my total? We'll call this $61,000. And we'll hit save. So that's easy enough. I've filled out $61,000 in acquisition. Well, what if I have another item in acquisition? Well, notice when I hit save, now I have an add button. If I click on add, I have another blank acquisition field, and I can fill that out. And let's say this is new furnace and so there's one of them. You can see quantity, if applicable. You don't have to fill it out. And then let's say this one is $29,000. Okay, so now that I've saved two items under acquisition, there's actually a drop-down that I can get back to the others. If I was to click on add, I could now add a third and so on. But what I've done is I've added $90,000 in acquisition, which is the $29,000 here and the $61,000 before. I could click on this category total summary. Now, it's not really helpful or useful when I only have two items in here. But if I have a whole bunch of items that I've listed, I can click on this category total summary, click on open, and it'll open up an Excel spreadsheet for me where I can actually kind of double check my work. And let's say I had a list of 20 items here. I can make sure that everything adds up. I can make sure I type the amounts right, and I can make sure that I didn't have any typos or weird information here in the type description. So this is just a way of double checking your work if you have more than one or many items in a specific category. In my case, I only had two here in acquisition. All right, so let's go back to the Forms menu, and we'll go down to construction. Let's say I've got a couple items as well. So I've got so maybe more details I'll provide, whatever can fit on the line here. And then let's call this $72,000. Obviously, I'm using round numbers. Yours may not be round numbers. All right, so I added one item in construction. Let's add one more. New kennels, and we'll say that's $88,000. You see, I'm just trying to keep it round. So I've got $160,000 here. All right, I'm going to go back to the Forms menu, and let's just say I have something in administration as well. I'm only going to do one item. And we'll just say this is $7,000. All right, so if I go back to my Forms menu, I put in those items, and what do they add up to? If I go to Capital Summary, this will show what everything adds up to. So I have, right now I have $90,000 plus $160 plus $7,000 for my project. Now, all I filled out was how much the project is costing, not how much I'm asking for. That's what you do here on this capital summary page. So again, in the forms menu, the categories are the overall cost for that part of the project. Again, this is not your $5 million project or your $1 million project. This is the one portion of it that you're carving out to ask for the funding for this grant opportunity. So I filled out the different items, but now I have to say what part of it we are covering and what part of it we're asking for the grant to cover. So if I go here and I write, let's say $70,000 and $20,000, because of course 70 and 20 adds up to 90,000, that's what I have covered here for acquisition. If I go and put in for construction, so we have 160,000 total there. Let's call this 90,000, and then 70,000. Oops, not 700, 70,000. And then finally for administration, let's say we have 7,000. Let's call this 5,000 and 2,000. So if I did the math right, I won't get an error here. And we can see for our $250,000 project, 165 of it is grant funds and 92,000 of it is match funds. Now, we required at least a 25% match. Again, we want you to ignore how it calculates here, but I am meeting that threshold or exceeding that threshold. You can see I'm at 55%. So the problem here is if you go too low. Let's say I just made this $7 instead of $70,000. You can see now I get an error because my match is calculated at 13%, where the threshold in the gateway is this 25%. Okay, so you have to obviously make sure that you are, I forgot what I had here, 70,000. You want to make sure that you have numbers that make sense and that fall within parameters that are allowed. Okay, so again, let me go back to the agriculture website. That can be helped down here. If we go to the apply section here, and there is a, where is it? Match calculation in budget formation. So if I clicked on this, it actually gives you guidance if you were a certain type of organization with a certain type of project. So this gives you guidance for a larger metropolitan area and a smaller metropolitan area, and it talks about the amounts that are allowed and the amount of matches that is required. So I would certainly go through here as guidance for it, but as you saw in the gateway, all the gateway is going to say to you is if you're meeting that 25% or not. Now you know if you're a larger municipality, you need to be at 50%, not the minimum of 25%. Okay? So if I go back to the forms menu, I've done my questions. Now, of course, I missed one, but we'll ignore that for now. I finished my budget. There's no more errors on it. And now I have the work plan section. So the work plan is two main sections, the overview form and then the work plan properties, which is really the details of it. So remember, this is a 2-year period. You don't have to be specific. You don't have to be exact here. You might be off by a month or so. That's not a big deal. We can change it later. But let's just say I'm going to be 5/1/2020, and they're 2-year projects, so that would be 4/31/2021, 2022. Okay, project summary. Provide a high-level overview of the project, including the overall goal and desired outcomes. So we want details here. This will end up on your contract. I mean, it could be tweaked as you go through if you get awarded a contract, but this is really explaining what are we doing with the funding, all that information. So here, all right, so you may have a lot of information. You may have typed it in Word or something like that, Google Docs, and then paste it here. So there's a lot of information you can provide there. It's obviously going to be tough if you're trying to type in this box. You can see in Internet Explorer you can't scroll through it. So I do want to mention something about the browsers that you use. I'm using Internet Explorer 11 right now. That is our officially supported browser. I know it's ancient, and there's a lot of other browsers out there that are better and faster and newer, but the system is built on Microsoft.NET, and technically IE 11 is the version that's supported best with what we have. That'll be changing in the future. We are upgrading to work better with other browsers. So compatibility is not an issue with browsers. It just looks a little weird, except for in the work plan section, and I'll show you that on the next page. So organization capacity. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask the program what they want in this section. So sometimes they say, oh, don't worry about it because you've already typed it in your other application questions. Sometimes they want you to fill this out. I imagine he'll be answering me in a minute, and he'll tell me what to do here. But this is describe the staffing, qualifications, and ongoing staff development. Basically, what makes your organization able to actually do this project? How do you have the staff and the experience to do this? Okay, and you would hit save on that page. What did I do to the dates here? I guess I must have messed up the date. Okay, so here we have our project summary, our organizational capacity, and we're going to go back to the Forms menu and go to this Work Plan Properties. So this page really requires that you're in Internet Explorer 11. And the reason is when we get to some of the descriptions, it actually won't work properly in Chrome or some of the other browsers. But what you're doing here is you're typing out kind of the details of your form, hopefully of your project. Hopefully you've done this already on a Word document or an Excel sheet or something, and all you're doing is coming in here and copying and pasting your details. So let's just say for my project, we're going to say so the objective name is improve the health and safety of dogs in our shelter, and then here's some detail. All right, that's easy enough. Hit save. So now I've filled out an objective. Once I hit save, I now get a blank task and a blank second objective. So I need to have a task under objective 1. So maybe we need to first remove all dogs in care and put them in temp housing. And our details. Now you might just shorten it and do something like temp housing for dogs and then all the details there. So everything has a name and a description. Now if I hit save, I've now filled out objective 1, task 1.1, and now I have a blank performance measure 1.1.1. So first of all, maybe we need to select potential or select temporary boarding facility. So this is where if you're using Chrome or another browser, it won't work properly. So right here, if you're using IE 11, you can say, let's say our answer is a text 500 characters. So this is just how are you answering this? How are you providing the details on this performance measure? So performance measure is how are we going to measure that you actually did the thing you wanted to do? So maybe it will be the details of that. So how we will select the facility and maybe by what date. Select facility so maybe we're selecting it by date. Now if I hit save, I now have one complete objective, task, and performance measure. Now you can add more tasks. That would be 1.2. You can add more performance measures, 1.1.2, and you can add more objectives. So I'm going to add another performance measure, and then I'm going to add some text, and I'm going to hit save, and now I have one objective, one task, and 2 performance measures. Now maybe I have a second task under the first objective. And I'll hit save. So now that I have a 1.2, I need to have a 1.2.1, right? Because I need to have a performance measure for every task. And let's call this another text. You can see the difference here. Integer if your answer is only numbers. Yes, no if your answer is a yes, no. Normally, you're just using one of these text fields here. And here's the details, and I'll hit save. Now let's say I filled out one objective. That's objective number 1, which is improve the health and safety of the dogs in the shelter. But maybe I have another objective. So I can go down here to objective number 2. And again, as I hit save, it's now going to give me a new task. And if I hit save, it's going to give me a new performance measure. And I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to call this was originally the 2nd p.m. I'll show you why in a second. So now I have 2 tasks. One of them has, 2 objectives. One of them has 2 tasks and several performance measures. The other one has 1 task and 2 performance measures. Now notice I can remove things. Let's say I just want to delete this, and I'm not going to. But if I hit check and then save, I can delete it. But what if I realized they're in the wrong order? You can use these up or down arrows to reorder them. So let's say I want 2.1.2, which was called, this was originally the 2nd p.m. I'm going to move it up to 2.1.1. If I click the up arrow, now the one that's called, this was originally the 2nd p.m. is now the 1st p.m. performance measure. All right, so I've done that, and I want to hit save, and I've saved my work plan. Now, one thing that people call our help desk for is saying, I can't preview my work plan. You'll see in a minute when we go back to the forms menu, we can preview our application, but it won't let us see our work plan. So unfortunately, that's a limitation that you have to deal with. The way to preview it is right here. You know, what I would have done is filled it out in a spreadsheet or a Word doc, and I would have copy and pasted everything verbatim from there to here. So this technically should look exactly like my spreadsheet, but to just double check, you just have to scroll through and look at it. It's the only way you can do it. So if there's somebody else at your organization to do it, that you need to do it, they either need access to the gateway or you need to print it out in a way that they can read it. Now remember, if I print out here, some of the boxes are filled out, or I'm sorry, some of the boxes hidden from us because I have to scroll. So printing it out won't really help me in that. All right, so I'm going to go back to the forms menu, and I think I'm done. I've done my project site addresses, my questions. Of course, we missed one. I did my budget. It's within the parameters of what I'm allowed to do. I did my work plan, and I went to the pre-submission uploads, and I downloaded the annual statistics worksheet, and I used that for my answer in question 1E. Now, the last section here is the pre-submission upload, is the grantee document folder, and I can click on that, and if you just need to add additional documents, you can do that here. We don't really want you to do this, but if something happens along the way and we realize we need something else from you, you can go in here and put in a description and attach something and hit save. So again, that's kind of auxiliary if we need it later, but we hope we don't really need to use that. All right, so I think I'm done with my application. I want to submit it for review. Now let's ignore that we have this error, but how do we submit it? Well, remember, let's go to details. Remember, we're in the status of application in process, and I'll change it. So if I go to status changes, I can change it to the status of application submitted. So I click on that, and it says, wait a minute, you've got two errors, objectives, and then program-specific questions. I'm not sure what the objective is. Actually, I am sure what I do know what it is. That's interesting. Okay. So I'm going to go to program-specific questions. and I'm going to take care of, oh, question number 3C, I forgot to do that. So before I do that, I'm going to show you one other thing, and that is this check global errors. You can see that was under management tools and also up here. I can do that, and it can show me what fields that I missed. And I missed objectives and program-specific questions. We'll deal with program-specific questions first. So let's go to 3C, and here is my answer. Okay, so if I save that, that's taken care of. Now, unfortunately, this is a flaw that I'm just discovering right now. If we take a look at objectives, what does that mean? I'm remembering this now from last year. So, if I click on objectives, this is interesting. Let's just see what happens. It lets me do it. No, it doesn't. Okay. So I have to explain this here. I guess we must have encountered this last year, and maybe we worked around it, but here's the deal. The Grants Gateway, the work plan, has a new version as of July of last year, 2018. And that new version superseded this old version that I'm being forced to fill out here, objectives, tasks, performance measures. So what it did was there was a single page for objectives, a single page for tasks, and then a single page for performance measures. The new way is a lot easier. Unfortunately, I'm now remembering, of course, live in this webinar, that we copied last year's version, which actually was probably a copy of the previous year's version, and that included the old work plan. So to work around that, I'm going to be clear here. I'm going to put it in the video as well. This may change. I don't know if we can take care of this in the back end, but it's only a small little thing for you, and I hope this will work live. Let's see. So just put in objective, and hit save. So this is not my real work plan. Now, if I go to Forms menu, I've got tasks. This is the old way of doing it. I'm just going to put in task, info, and then finally under Forms menu, performance measure, PM, info. This is all just to satisfy this requirement in the system that should have been turned off, but unfortunately wasn't. But I think that should do the job. So if that's the case, we will write this in special instructions and provide it to you. This will obviously be in the video that we have recorded and will provide. And I apologize, but it's only another 30 seconds of work. So you would get that error, you'd click on the error, you'd fill out the objective, you'd fill out the task, you'd fill out the PM, just with bogus information, because this will never be checked by anybody. So let's hope that I can submit it here. I think I can. So again, I think I'm done with my application. I go to status changes, and I go to application submitted, and it gives me this agreement that says, yes, I am who I say I am. I'm allowed to submit on behalf of my organization, and I haven't given my password to anybody, and I'm going to submit my application. So I click on I agree, and it's now processing my application, and this is now, of course, prior to January 21st at 4 p.m., and I've submitted it. So since it's before the due date, it lets me do it, and if I click on details, you remember before we were in assignment of reviewers, before we were in application in process, now we're in assignment of reviewers. So while it's working, I want to show you a couple things at the end here. So if we go back to Forms menu, one thing I skipped over was print application. That can be used to preview your application before you submit it. Now I did it because what we're waiting for here is the application version to be created. So that's about 5 or 10 minutes after you submit your application. You can expect the whole PDF to be created here. But what we're going to do is, let's say we haven't submitted it yet. You're going to go to print application, and it'll ask you if you want to print it. I don't really want to print it. I just want to look at it. This is a good way of you looking at your whole list of all the questions and answers you've provided and all the details you've provided, including your budget. It will not show you attachments. and it will not show you your work plan. So here's my answer to question 1A. Here's my answer to question 1B, and so on. Now, it tells me I did have an upload here in 1E, but it doesn't actually let me look at that document. So we do need to check that, and I would strongly suggest you check your uploads before you submit your application. I will say we had somebody just yesterday in another grant opportunity for a different agency. They didn't upload what they thought they uploaded. They uploaded the same document twice, where it should have been 2 different documents in 2 different sections, and they got disqualified. So they went through all that work, and they didn't even get to the point of being reviewed because they didn't provide one of the required documents they needed to. So just looking at this is not going to help you with that. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But here's my budget. Here's how my capital summary worked out. Here is that project summary. And here's those bogus objectives, tasks, performance measures. Remember, these are not the real ones. And then the pre-submission uploads, they're just links. It doesn't really help us with anything. And then the attestation that Barbara signatory signed at 11/13. Application versions. Now remember, this is after you submit your application. So when you reviewed, I did print application. I wasn't able to review my attachments. To review my attachments, I would go actually to the attachments under program-specific questions, and I would actually go down to, let's say, 1E, and click on View File, and see the document I actually attached. If I go to 2A, same deal. So click on View File, and open it, and you can see I just had a document here called Sample Attachment, but make sure this is what you intended for that question. So please make sure you double-check those before you submit it, because you don't want to get disqualified because you just you attached the wrong thing in the wrong place. All right, so that's before you submit your application. After, again, about 5 or 10 minutes later, this application version is created, and you can see the totality of what you've submitted. If I go here and click on this document, I can see one PDF that has everything. So cover page, my application number, when it was submitted, what I called my project, how much I'm asking for in the grant, $165,000. Who submitted it and when? And then page 3 is that project site address. Now, I think somebody had a question about that, which I can't get back to for some reason. But the project site address is really not important to us. Just where is your project being run out of? It's probably the project, I should really call it, where is the project being undertaken? So where is the facility that you're working on? Program-specific questions, there's those questions and my answers. And remember, for instance, 1C or 1E had an attachment. Now, the attachment's not here, but we will see it in a minute. Same deal for 2A and 2C and so on. All these attachments will exist here as we scroll down. So here's all my answers, and now those attachments. Here's the 1E attachment. So obviously I didn't fill anything out, but this would be your spreadsheet here that you provided. Then we have that whatever attachment I did for 2A or whatever number that was, another attachment, and then we get into our budget. There's that capital summary. And here is the different categories. Acquisition, the 2 lines I put in and the amount for each one. Construction, 2 lines, the amount. And then capital, what is this? Oh, admin, and the 1 line, and then the description, and the totals. Then we have our work plan. This is that project summary. Now this is the actual work plan that we did in the work plan properties, and that would be objective 1 and objective 2 here. Okay, so it ends with the organizational capacity, which is that last field I talked about in the work plan section, and then any other attachments you provided in the pre-submission uploads, which we're not asking for, and in the grantee document folder, which we're not asking for, but I did add 1 if you remember. All right, so this is my 21-page document. Yours will probably be a little bit longer than that. Now, one last thing I'll say about that. If you look through it and you say, oh my God, I just messed something up, I did something wrong, I want it back, you can actually email our help desk and ask for us to send your application back to you, as long as you're within, a few days of that timeline of January 21st. We don't want to send it back to you at, 3:52 on January 21st. But if it's January, 18th and you realize you messed something up and you want to fix it, that's no problem. We'll send it back to you, and you just have to resubmit it.
Jeff, it's Dave Chico. Can I make a few comments?
Please do.
Hi, everyone. This is Dave Chico. I'm with the Department of Agriculture and Markets, working with Michaela Fowler on this grant cycle. I just wanted to say a couple things. Please make sure that we have the correct point of contact moving forward with your application. A lot of times, if a grant writer is employed, they may be the submitter, and that comes up as the point of contact. But when it comes time to discuss contracting, I don't have a good name or address or phone number. So you can email our department or Michaela Fowler that information. The contracting process takes a good 4 to 8 weeks after you've been awarded the grant. There's several steps that go on. You have to submit a series of required documents which will tell you if you're an awardee, and then it has to go through internal approval and then approval at the State Comptroller's office as well. So it does take a little bit of time. Please read the questions carefully. Several of the questions refer back to ASV, or the Association of Shelter Veterinarian Guidelines for Shelters. Please, when it's asking for a tie back to the ASV guidelines, please make sure that you include that in your answer. And a general comment would be more detail is better than less detail, because as a reviewer, we're really looking to get a good understanding of your project and your program. And so the more you can tell us about it and the impact, the better it's going to be for you when it comes time to have it reviewed. Thank you.